Okay. Again, hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, which will cover global trends and opportunities for women in technology and investment, hence the name. I'm Levan Beridze. I'm the Consulate General of Georgia in San Francisco. And really, it is my pleasure to be hosting you all today for this webinar in partnership with BoomStartup Accelerator, and the Parliament, Georgia's Parliament's Gender Equality Council. Now, in our internal discussions, we felt it was the right time and need to focus our discussion today on this specific topic, which I hope will be useful to women entrepreneurs, especially young professionals who are looking to transform their ideas into startups, startups into large companies, or even large companies into globally recognizable brands. Again, now let me begin again by thanking all of you for expressing your interest in our conference and taking the time to be here with us today. As I already mentioned, we have good topics planned for you for our discussion and exceptional speakers, which we will introduce in a minute. Before, let me briefly outline the mission of our Consulate General here in San Francisco and the purpose this webinar plays in adding value to what we are trying to accomplish. As some of you know, and I'll give it a brief overview of Georgia, where we are and where we stand, but as some of you know, Georgia has worked tirelessly since regaining its independence from the Soviet Union to establish itself as a strong democratic state with a liberal and free economy. Now, being on the crossroads between Asia and Europe certainly helps Georgia strengthen its position as a regional hub for not only energy transit, but overall as for trade and commerce. Now, to attract foreign companies and support economic growth, we have intensified our efforts to further strengthen the business-friendly environment and making it desirable for companies to expand into. And now, as the world continues to evolve rapidly, we see the rise of age of digitalization and see the necessity for increasing investments, specifically in tech and innovation ecosystems around the world. Now, Georgia, as many emerging economies, we also see strong emphasis being made on the creation and strengthening of such an ecosystem in our country as well. Now, as you know, being on the forefront of innovation and tech development, the United States stands out as one of the leading destinations for startups around the world, which is in pursuit of knowledge, best practices, and the opportunities for growth, including, of course, large or vast access to finance, right? As for Georgia, the ICT sector has been targeted by the government to be the leading sector of interest now, investing heavily in the creation and strengthening of the innovation and technology ecosystem in the country, which I think in turn supports an effective development of tech startups, as well as strengthens the business environment overall. Now, the rise in emerging tech startups in Georgia heavily increases the need to utilize vast resources available in the countries such as the United States, which, as I just mentioned, provides, again, one of the best startup and innovation environments around the world. Now, to tell you why we are here, right? I mean, the Consulate General of Georgia in San Francisco, and by the way, we are the only official representation of Georgia on the Western United States. We cover 19 states, including Utah, from where we have our wonderful speakers joining us today, and where I'll be flying to in a few hours to join the Silicon Slopes there. So we are very active here on the West Coast, trying to make sure that we are active with different states and seek the opportunities that I was just talking about, and allow access for Georgian companies to gain access to those resources. So in addition, as I said, and the promotion, protection and promotion of the rights and interests of our citizens here in the scheme of basically larger effort of expanding the US-Georgia bilateral economic cooperation, one of our main priorities is again, to support the strengthening of the Georgian tech innovation and the startup ecosystems from here. Precisely why we continue to find reliable partners in Georgia and in the US, and basically with the combined efforts, these contacts, these partners could have a tremendous impact and provide tremendous outcome for companies looking to expand internationally and gain access to the resources available here, and not only here, but across countries all over the world outside of Georgia. But for the purposes of our discussion here today, I think it's important to focus on the necessity of increasing participation of women, in STEM, and which I think will certainly lead into increasing women participation in tech and kind of boost women-led startups or help develop more women-led startups. As most research that I was reading about suggests today, women in tech or women in companies in leading roles significantly boost creativity, increase productivity, and certainly diversify the scope of companies across different sectors. Now, today's webinar will aim to promote women's participation in STEM overall, strengthening women-funded companies, and creating networking ties between the US and Georgian startup ecosystems. Our panelists today will expose the ongoing trends and advancements both in technology and fundraising for women, and emphasize how our communities are addressing challenges and activating support. Now, that was pretty much taken from the invitation. So again, as I mentioned in the beginning, we have exceptional speakers lined up for you today, representing educational institutions, financial platforms, and organizations actively engaged in supporting development of tech companies, especially promoting women participation and engagement. In this regard, I mean, I'm going to try not to talk too much, but let me introduce you to our co-organizers of this event, and certainly without whom this webinar would not have been possible, because let me tell you again, I'm nowhere near as knowledgeable on the subject as these guys. So let me start out by introducing Mariam Lashki, who is the member of the Parliament of Georgia, is the Deputy Chair of External Relations Committee, member of the Education Committee, and the most importantly, very active member of the Gender Equality Council. In a few minutes, I'll ask Mariam to provide us with an insight into the current developments in women-led tech environment in Georgia, and what her vision is towards further strengthening of women participation in STEM overall. I should also mention that Mariam was before joining Parliament of Georgia, was the Deputy Chairman of the Georgia Innovation and Technology Agency, and is now also an Associate Professor at the Business and Technology University, where Nino is also joining us from. Mariam, thank you very much for being with us today. And before I ask you to share your thoughts with us, now I will also want to introduce Tara. Tara Spalding. Tara is a Managing Director of BoomStartup Accelerator, which is an accelerator and a mentorship-driven angel stage investment program for startups. It operates as an online technology-driven accelerator, providing entrepreneurs a custom business plan, including business maturity guidance, investment preparation, and capital structuring relevant to growth, as well as investment strategies and curated marketplace for services. Tara is also a founder of Henhouse Ventures, an early stage incubator that helps tech companies rapidly scale when entering massive markets, and is also on the board of trustees for venturecapital.org, where we also have a wonderful speaker from there as well. And I do have to mention here that Tara is the recipient of the 2020 Utah Business 30 Women to Watch Award. And let me tell you, we are definitely watching her. I'm glad that Tara has agreed to co-organize this event with us. And I truly appreciate all the support I received from her since we met just more than a year ago. Tara will lead our panel discussion today as a moderator, and will introduce to you our wonderful panelists in a few minutes. Now, again, without further ado, let me ask Mariam to start us out and give us her remarks and her thoughts on the environment.
Thank you very much, Levan. First of all, good morning to our US participants and good evening to our Georgia participants. I'm very delighted and happy to be today with you and to finally come up with this webinar. I'm very glad also to have such wonderful speakers today and share their thoughts. I see that this type of events are putting a lot of the efforts in building the community and also building the bridges between US and Georgia. So thank you very much, first of all, to Consulate General of Georgia in San Francisco, personally Levan, and of course, Tara, you have been wonderful, first of all, for your readiness, for all the efforts you put in this short time of period, and also helping Georgia to catch up to US speed. So, and also thank you very much to all the participants who also shared their readiness to be today with us, and also support our women entrepreneurs and women who are interested in tech, in STEM direction. We've come a long way since the 1920s when the women first rushed into the streets for their right to vote. But although it's been more than 100 years since a disruption to the status quo, a lot remained unchanged. Like women continue to make less money than men, gender discrimination and sexual harassment remains still prevalent in the jobs. So there definitely are some of the kind of opportunities for women because we are underrepresented. A lot of the opportunities like scholarships and assistance for women in tech appear, which we have to uptake and support other females to uptake the opportunities. So starting from the coding, bootcamp scholarships, ending up with computer science and STEM scholarships, and also organized nonprofits for women. There has been some of the good progress, especially in Georgia, when the especially after the pandemic, when all the processes have been accelerated, and this like pandemic has also supported, like with work from home became a new normal, and it has paved a new way for women willing to join the tech industry. Currently, there are only like 26% of women in engineering roles generally, but still, and also like big names in the tech companies like Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Twitter employ less than 20% of women. So these numbers have to be changed, and the similar type of initiatives and awareness raisings, as well as specific programs, are for raising awareness for the companies, as well as supporting women to have the equal opportunities in the companies. Equal opportunities to climb the corporate ladder, ensuring that women are afforded equal opportunities to rise through the ranks is a very important first step in equalizing the representation, especially in the businesses. There has been some of the, and I remember also here the quote from the Facebook COO, who said that the word female, when inserted in front of something, is always with a note of surprise, like female COO, female pilot, or female surgeon, as if the gender implies a surprise. I hope that one day there won't be female leaders and there will be just leaders. So for this and for raising awareness and for supporting it, Georgia has conducted really good steps and reforms for ensuring the gender equality, starting from the institutional framework development through which we have developed this specific agency like GITA, as Levan was mentioning, who included in the program specific programs, starting from the access to finance programs for grants and venture financing, also including the trainings, awareness raising initiatives, which was a very important step forward. On the other side, Georgia also works actively in legal framework to ensure that legal environment for gender is equal, and especially kind of scoring initiatives, which is supporting the females to be involved in the programs, was very important step forward. On the other note, from the Gender Equality Council, from the Parliament, we have various numbers of initiatives, and just recently in this 10th convocation, we've joined UN Coalition Innovation and Technology for Gender Equality, through which the country uptook the responsibility to further promote the initiatives. And in this framework, we have also a lot of the initiatives. On the other side, like party which I'm representing, the ruling party, Georgian Dream, has established the Women Wing, women organization, within which we also put innovation and technology as a key pillar for economic empowerment of women as a key priority. And in this framework, we'll be organizing various events where I see also your participation by the end of October. We'll be also having very cool festival, which is promoting the female participation in tech and STEM. So I think that one of the most important things is to, first of all, understand the role of innovation technology as a key kind of driver of the economic welfare in the country, and on the other side, then implement and plan correctly the reforms and the agenda. I hope that we are on the right track, and I also very happy that US, as always, is being one of the major partner in this direction, where we have a lot of the support from the embassy and also from the USAID and other programs where we kind of express our sincere kind of gratefulness. With this, I think I will stop here, and I'll be happy to later on engage on further discussions. And we have wonderful representatives from Georgia as well to further go in depth into the concrete programs and initiatives. And I'm very much looking forward to hearing the US perspective. So thank you very much once again. I'm very pleased to have this webinar.
Mariam, thank you very much. We really appreciate your input. And like you said, it's right. I mean, we should not have that word in front of anything. It should be a leaders conference. It should be whatever it is, when there is no differentiation anymore. So we hope that we are moving in the right direction, as you said. Thank you. Tara, may I ask you to unmute and kick us off as well with your introduction and remarks, and also the panel discussion.
Yes, thank you, Levan, and thank you so much, Mariam, for expressing your situation as well as intent to change, because it is a complex situation. I have been born and raised in the United States, but I lived in several states, in fact, 8 of them over the course of my lifetime, and have noticed that there is so much great opportunity in economic development if this parity is in place. I feel very fortunate to have dedicated my career in the space of software technology, as well as entrepreneurism, and eventually today to investment, and tomorrow I'm putting forth even stronger effort to put forward women entrepreneur and women investments programs, which we'll talk about at a later time. But every single thing that we do is that if the resources are equally available for all, and we remove the gender lens, then how much further can we innovate? How much further can we advance our local economies and just bring that sort of parity when it comes to voice, representation, and participation? So thank you so much. I'm going to introduce our panel and actually give each a few moments to express their background, as well as why they are working on influencing women to participate more so in technology or more so in investment. And so I'd like to start with Ms. Chandana Hawk. She is the executive director of Altitude Lab, who is combined with the University of Utah, as well as Recursion, which is one of our very large bioscience companies out here in Utah. Chandana, if you can tell a little bit more about yourself and why working with women is so important to you.
Thanks, Dara, and I'm so pleased to be with everyone here. This is an amazing panel of women. About me, so I'm actually a transplant to Utah. I grew up and spent most of my career in San Francisco and California around startups, around biotech and tech startups. And the energy in California is very much of shared ideas, everyone optimistic, working together to solve big problems. And I moved to Utah to bring the knowledge and energy from California here, only to find that so much of it already exists in Utah. So that was a really amazing experience for me. But what was really needed in Utah was helping more women find a path in entrepreneurship, in startup creation, because there are so many women here in Utah that lack the access points, the connections and resources, but have so much of the will and energy to do this, right? So that's why I'm so focused on this, this being creating opportunities for women and underrepresented minorities to participate in tech and biotech entrepreneurship. But my story is very much one that came from a background of lack of knowledge, but all the exposure. And so it taught me that with more access points and more exposure, all of us are very capable of being leaders in our field. So that's my background. I spent about 10 years doing product management, product strategy for biotech, brought companies to public offering, worked in M&A, did a year in venture capital, and now I run Altitude Lab, which is a life science startup incubator. So thanks, Tara. I'll pass it on to the next speaker.
That's wonderful. And you have that right sort of background. I'm very excited about what's going on at Altitude Lab because it is at the heart of innovation, especially at the early stages of, biomed and life sciences. So thank you for being here, Chandana. Really excited to hear your viewpoints on these important topics. Next, I'd like to introduce Leslie Goldman Tepper. She's a dear friend of mine, and in fact is one of the people that have encouraged me to personally make a stronger stride to include women at every single aspect of doing business. Leslie is the general partner, and she co-founded the Artemis Fund. And it's just such a wonderful organization. She has a legal degree and legal background as well. So Leslie, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am delighted to be here as well. So thank you for including me. Currently, I am general partner and co-founder of the Artemis Fund, and we are a exclusively female-focused venture capital fund. We invest in seed stage, female-founded companies, largely in fintech, but also care tech and e-commerce tech. And we are run by women. We were founded in 2019. We're on our second fund, and so far we have 20 portfolio companies in the two funds. So as you can see, I am, with my exclusive focus on women, I live and breathe this the idea and the dilemma, and we talk about it constantly. Why can't we get more female funding, more funding to women? 2% of world venture capital dollars goes to women still in this country, and it's no different anywhere else. So when you say you want to catch up to the US, there's not much to catch up to yet in terms of, funding women in venture capital, at least, and that's the lifeblood of our future. I mean, of our country is technology. That's why we're here. So I've always been interested in gender equality from a very early age. I was a women's studies. I got a master's in women's studies in Australia after I graduated from college, and have always worked in companies to increase opportunities for women, to help prevent them from leaving in the middle, in the middle stages of their, as they're climbing the ladder. You get the pyramid effect, where it's about 50-50 at the bottom levels, and then when you go to the top, you see fewer and fewer women who are all in the workforce. No different in law than it is in technology, than it is in probably most industries. So I'm obviously very passionate about trying to change that. Have always been passionate about trying to change that, and now changing it using money, using dollars, investing in women, and trying to get more women to invest in women, but trying just to spread the word that investing in women is a really good strategy, because there's evidence that when women get money, they outperform. So I will leave it at that. I'm very excited to be here again and looking forward to more.
Thank you so much, Leslie. Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Nana Dekamagia. Dr. Nana joins us from Georgia. Thank you so much for coming on board. And my goodness, you have the most diverse background. She is the director in Digital Transformation Center for Alta University in Georgia. Additionally, she leads the California chapter director for Globalized GE. So my goodness, thank you so much for being here. If you can introduce a little bit more about yourself, your background, and why encouraging women is so important.
Sure, it's my pleasure to participate in this webinar that discusses the issues that are very important actually for US and Georgia, and personally for me. Actually, right now I'm joining from Mountain View, Silicon Valley, because partially I live here. So it's morning for me, and I'm very delighted to meet these exceptional women talking about these issues. So first, for the first time, I started working on this so to attract more girls to tech when I was still living in Missouri, because I lived in Missouri for 5 years, working for Missouri University of Science and Technology for 4 years. I was volunteer robotics coach there, and we had very hard time to attract girls to robotics teams. And that's when we started developing programs. And after I returned to Georgia, I worked previously for Iowa State University, and now I'm working for Alta University. So we designed several programs to attract girls to tech, because it's very important. We still have disparities. This is a field which is economically very profitable for women. It will strengthen the women. This is the field where you can change the world. This is a field where you can design your own product. So basically, having tech skills gives you a lot of opportunities and a lot of strengths. And of course, this should be given, these opportunities to women. So that's why I'm doing that.
That's absolutely wonderful. And I think in setting that impression at such a young age, especially with something so advanced like robotics, is so critical. Love to hear more about this as we continue the panel discussion. But next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Nino Inukidze. Dr. Nino is the Director of Business Technology for the University, Director of Business Technology University in Georgia. Dr. Nino, thank you so much for joining us. And if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and telling us more about your passion about women inclusion.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me, and I'm really very happy to see such an inspiring speakers to be joining us today. This is really a very challenging time in terms of women empowerment in Georgia, as well as in many countries in the world, I'd say. So discussing this topic is always of the highest importance, I think. I am the Rector of Business and Technology University. I'm also the founder of Coding School for Women, which operates inside the university. And we have this story when 3 years ago, we have launched the Coding School for Women for the first time, and we opened the free registration link for every candidate, whoever wanted to join us. We only had 8 beneficiaries interested, and half of them decided not to follow the final part of the courses, which gave us the idea that the problem is much deeper and the challenge is much bigger than we expected it to be. And I won't say anything new if I mention that technology today is the most powerful tool for empowering and for supporting women, and it can really make a quick and transformative change into reducing gender inequality, defeating, I'd say, the injustices that girls face, not only in technology, I'd say, but because of their own gender in general. So today, for example, I'm involved in the program called 500 Women in Tech, which is supported by UN Women in Georgia. And we increased the number of the beneficiaries up to 1,000 already. And we are again adding several thousands to this program already. So I'm really happy, excited to share these numbers, even though I know for sure that it will not, only these initiatives will not make bigger change. I'm listening to all the ideas you all have. So I think that together, you know, creating this network will widely benefit all the stakeholders which we are focusing on. So again, thank you very much for today's meeting, and I'm happy to further discuss the challenges and opportunities we are having.
Well, and I'm very interested in hearing more about the paths to engagement, as well as, you know, offboarding so they can maintain successful presence. So cannot wait to hear more of your viewpoints. And last, I'd like to introduce Mr. Trent Christensen. He is the CEO of venturecapital.org, a nonprofit that is helping founders that has a strong women entrepreneur initiative underway. Trent, thank you so much for being here today. If you can introduce yourself and talk a little bit more about why women engaging in not only technology, but more importantly, investment is important.
Absolutely. And thank you, Tara. Thank you, General Counsel. Thank you, everyone, for being on this call. I just feel privileged to be on this panel. I know several of you, and I'm glad to meet the rest of you. So thank you. My background is in fundraising, politics, and law. And as I've come more into the venture world, I've noticed a few things. I've noticed things that are really, really hopeful, and things that that bother me. And it's not something that I have that's unique, but I have 2 daughters. And 2 years ago, we hold a women's conference. The name of the conference is We Rock. It's an acronym. It stands for Women Entrepreneurs Realizing Opportunities for Capital. And we do it specifically to help promote women, thank you, and help them find capital, overcome some of the barriers that they have. And 2 years ago, it happened to fall on my second daughter's birthday. And so I took her out of school and I brought her to our conference. And it was amazing to me, and a little bit of a wake-up call to me, to see her watch these amazing women up on stage. And she'd say, "Dad, wait, you're telling me that woman started that company?" And I would say, "Yes, that is exactly what I'm saying to you. And you can do that too." And just to watch the wheels turn in her head about, okay, yeah, I could do this. I could do this. And so right in that moment, it took on a very personal turn for me to make sure that not just my daughters, but all daughters everywhere can see that, and can see that kind of, and have that kind of awareness about what's available to them. So at venturecapital.org, there's a phrase that I truly dislike when people say we invest in women companies because it's the right thing to do. And it goes to your earlier point about, a female investor, a female pilot, right? The phrase "it's the right thing to do" makes it sound like it's charity, makes it sound like I'm doing it out of the goodness of my heart, makes it sound like I wouldn't do it otherwise, but it's the right thing to do. And so what we've tried to do is show not just investors, but everyone, it's not just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. This was brought up earlier. Multi-race, multi-gender executive teams will always consistently outperform single-race, single-gender executive teams. And so as we work with investors, as we work with venture capitalists, our message to them consistently over time, and we're starting to have an impact, is it's not the right thing to do. It's the only thing to do if you want to maximize returns. And part of that is getting these amazing women entrepreneurs up on stage and having them tell their story, having them pitch their company, and demonstrating both to these investors and to the world the strength of their company, the strength of their vision, and the strength of the ecosystem within those women-led companies. We're going to go over these stats, I'm sure, but 38% of all small businesses in America right now are run or owned by women. And I think, Tara, you've already mentioned less than 4% of the available investment capital in any given year goes to women-led companies. So that's the purpose of We Rock. We want to increase that number from 4 to 10 to 20 to 30, right? That's our stated goal. Part of that is we're working on increasing deal flow among women-led companies at venturecapital.org, and we've had some success there. And we've noticed that as we've laser focused in on increasing deal flow among women-led companies, that all demographics have improved. That we've raised deal flow among minority populations, among veteran populations, among the population generally. And that same effect carries across everything we've done. So now that we've built up deal flow among women-led companies, our new initiative that we'll be announcing this year is to put women on the funding side of the table. I can't give too many details about it because it's going to be announced on October 7th, but we're starting to follow in the footsteps of people like Leslie at the Artemis Fund and really increase the amount of energy on the funding side of the table from women entrepreneurs and from women investors. So that's our focus. That's my background. I'm passionate about it because I'm passionate about my state and my country, and it's how we're going to help them improve. I'll finish with this. Tara and I recently attended a conference in which they were talking about how do we grow entrepreneurship in the state, and they were talking about all these little ideas about playing around the margin. How we can kind of work better together here, there, just little things. And we said, no, you need to fix women entrepreneurship. If you can have a marginal increase there, you'll have a massive impact across the entire ecosystem. And that's what will help Utah, which is where I'm from. That's what will help this country. That's what will help Georgia. I fully believe that if we are to better the future of our countries, it rests in the hands of women entrepreneurs. That's why I'm passionate about it. So I'm so excited to be here. So excited to if I can add something to this conversation with all the amazing people on the call. And so Tara and General Counsel, thank you for the invitation.
Trent, thank you so much. And we need advocates regardless of gender to express the discrepancy here. And I really appreciate you participating in this. And in fact, what you just mentioned, as well as Dr. Nino, is something that I'd like to first put out to this panel, which is women account for approximately 48% of the workforce. However, there's a discrepancy in tech-related jobs where it's only held by, women only hold 26.7% of these jobs. So, it's a significant discrepancy. Why do you, as the panelists, think that there's this sort of gender disparity? And what positive changes or opportunities are surfacing to improve gender parity when it comes to technology?
Well, thank you very much for the question. I think that gender disparity is caused due to many reasons. Ideally, we all want to live in the world where we perform the work that is best suited to our abilities. Where an individual in a position, for example, in tech industry, let's say, receives the same respect regardless the gender. It will, for example, if a man and women have gender atypical roles, perhaps we can become less likely to devalue some workers on the basis of old-fashioned gender stereotypes. Many jobs in the economy are gender stereotyped. So I would say like firefighter, for example, is thought to be a men's job. I don't know why, but still, while nursing is thought to be a women's work. Still, we have seen multiple studies that these stereotypes, which shape our expectations about whether a man or a woman is a better fit for a given job, are powerful because they can bias a whole host of employment outcomes, right? So, for instance, they influence the chances that a man or woman will even apply for the job. and he or she will be hired, the pay each would receive, or even performance evaluations that determine promotions, each comes to these reasons. So the lack of female models in each profession, I think, might also be also reinforce the perception that technology career is not for them. Technology organizations, I think, need to highlight how technology is a force for good if they want to attract more women in the sector. And let's mention that it's been estimated that around 90% of future jobs will require ICT skills, and millions of jobs will be created in the computer engineering or mathematical fields in years future. So some studies even estimate that around 65% of children entering primary school today will have jobs that don't yet exist, right? So, and we don't have to forget about the COVID-19, which still isn't going. Okay, we can say that things are getting better, but the COVID-19 outbreak is impacting all sectors, including ICT. However, in comparison with many other sectors, ICT is still comparatively resilient. Recently, I have read a PwC research. It was a study on the impact of COVID-19 on business in Georgia that found that ICT sector was the least affected, and, for example, one of the sectors with the lowest number of reductions in employee headcount. But still, women aren't considering technology careers in Georgia as well as in many other countries. And I think the statistics are better, I don't think I know due to research that statistics is better in the United States, but still it depends about which state we are talking, right? So still women are not considering tech careers because they are not given, I don't know, enough information, what working in the sector involves, and also because no one is putting it forward as an option to them, I think. Well, in Georgia, I can say for sure this is one of the reasons. So now if we discuss opportunities, I do believe that power of communication, which I mentioned in my previous speech, and the networking and, manifesting the idea of empowering women in tech is very important. And this is one of the reasons inside Business and Technology University, we have founded this coding school for women. So I think it's time to explain in details to wider auditorium, to bigger groups of women and men also, how involving female workforce in technology industry will positively affect the economy. It will definitely positively affect many indexes like GDP, like Human Capital Index, and many others. And also it will very much affect the social injustice that a number of countries are facing. Unfortunately, women and girls are currently the least skilled to adapt to the new reality and take advantage of the digital tools at their disposal. So awareness raising, showing the potential of the growing industry, and the freedom of choice which we can give to them while empowering each other's network might be the right step to move forward. So let's discuss it further during today's meeting.
And I like what you also said, Dr. Nino, about having the role models as well as like the safe learning zones as well, to encourage the forefront as to where the economy is going. So thank you so much. Dr. Nino. Oh, go ahead, Leslie.
Yeah, I was going to jump off that point on the role models. I mean, this is one of the reasons that we started the Artemis Fund, because the role models are few and far between. If you look at the large companies or large technology, or most technology companies are run by men, and you won't see women in the CEO role or running these tech companies unless you have them starting at the bottom of the continuum from the early stage. And so as I did some executive recruiting, and it was clear that the companies that I was working with, they wanted to diversify their boards. And in particular, they wanted to gender diversify their boards. boards of directors. And these were multinational companies that would hire us and retain me to find gender diverse and diverse board members. Well, the executive teams of these companies were largely male and largely white male, and in order to change that demographic, you have to change it from the beginning of the continuum. Is what is the conclusion that I came to, because you're not going to just plug in people at the top level who are, you know, from a different background of the rest of the executive team. You won't change. You won't have any role models for women if you don't have any women at the executive team of these corporations. So that's one of the reasons I'm tackling it from the very beginning stages. We need more women in to run tech companies, to bring them up through the growth stage and ultimately to become larger companies. In order for women to see themselves as CEOs, they have to see women in CEO positions.
Absolutely.
I love that additive, Leslie, especially at the growth stage. I saw Dr. Nana nodding her head in total agreement. If you wouldn't mind sharing your thoughts.
Yeah, I totally agree with Leslie about role models, but also we know that gender disparity reasons in tech and engineering is well researched, right? Starting from the early childhood. It starts with gender-specific toys. It starts with stereotypical attitudes of parents, which is very important, let's say, in the childhood. And it starts with gender-specific activities. And that's where Lego, for example, is doing a good job now. They finally realize that they can't be different Legos related to gender for children, right? And they're now starting offering the similar toys and not this aisles of split of blue and pink, right? But also what I see in the US, all this activity started around like 20 years ago, right? 15, 20. Approximately. Also programs which try to attract more girls and more women to tech field. For me, I'm a mathematician by training and I work in tech field. So I have a PhD in applied mathematics and I work in tech field for around more than 20 years now. Once you get to the field, it gets much easier. Of course, you will meet stereotypes, but you're strong enough now because you believe in your knowledge, and tech, like people with STEM education are not so many, so every resource is valued more or less. You meet stereotypes, but it's fine. You can overcome them easier. So the difficulty is to get youth to this field, to get young women to this field. So the main problems we have, it's at the school level. That's where we should work more and more to direct. Because all this confidence, for example, for me, when I chose math program for my college, I met a lot of surprise, and business was very popular in Georgia at that time. It was like very dark 90s. Soviet Union was collapsed like 2 or 3 years ago, and everyone was going to the business. And math was absolutely unprofitable. For the first 2 years when I graduated, I worked for the Applied Mathematics Institute for like $15 a month. So it was absolutely unprofitable, but I had this confidence starting from my childhood. So that's where we need to work. Like every stereotype I met, I would easily overcome it. I would not accept it. And this is very important. Also, I teach. I meet with around like 500-600 girls every year, school girls, because we have through different programs. And usually I tell them that it's in your power what to accept and what not, like society attitude. So this is very important. So we should work more in these programs from school, in schools, after school programs. I see a lot of very interesting programs in Georgia. Also BGU is doing, and a lot of universities are doing similar programs, and that's good. That's if you look last 7 years of admissions at the university, we will see that in Georgia, computer science and engineering programs, number of girls increasing slightly, like maybe 5% a year but it is increasing. It gives me a lot of hope.
But that's the positive change that we need, and it just takes time. So thank you for sharing your perspective. I'd like to ask the panel, in the United States, mid-sized technology companies make up over half of the technology employers for women. And these companies tend to have they have the same representation with parity in at least one of the career levels, because as you mentioned before, it's important to see leaders as well as workers in the parity with a similar gender representation. I'd like to ask the panelists, what hope or impact do mid-sized companies have for setting the higher standards and being exemplary when it comes to engaging women in technology? For example, how can more women involved in engineering and math and sciences affect smaller or earlier stage companies, or even upstream, larger, like for example, GE or older companies? Chandana, if you have any thoughts on this.
Oh yeah, I loved this question because I think there's two sides to it. Employers feel like, the common complaint for developing women through the workforce is that pipeline's an issue, right? Like we always hear about this. There's not enough women with the qualifications in order to place them in executive roles. And on the flip side, women in the workforce feel like there's not enough role models, there's not enough methods to support them as they grow through the organization to keep them in the workforce. In Utah, we have a very strong culture of having children early in your career, so that's doubly impacted. So we have women that finish master's, PhDs, but immediately want to have families after, and it makes it difficult to translate that into a corporate lifestyle. So when you talk about mid-size employers and what they can do to bolster their, the gender diversity within their workforce at all levels, to me, it really comes to how do you support parents? That's like a fundamental question right at the outset. If you want to grow executives in your company, so you want to take someone from entry level, build them into managers, and great managers build them into executives, you've got to provide support for parents and make the economics of parenting easier. That's got to be true both for dads and moms. In the US, it's getting more and more common to have 2-income households, and both members of the family play a role here. In other countries, maternity leave benefits and how we handle parenting responsibilities, it's got to change across the board, both in terms of how we handle salary, leave, and then other benefits to support flexible work, et cetera. So as far as how we translate the growth path for women, like this is the fundamental question. It also plays into the gender pay gap. That's become very predominantly the biggest big point of rationale in gender disparity. The other point, which we've talked about a lot here, is role models, right? So building in active searches for women in boards, in executive leadership roles, and then giving those women the tools and capacity to nurture the workforce and grow the women under them too, right? To be role models, right? So that's both at play here. And what this does at the mid-size company stage is create women leaders to go to startups, to small companies, and model that same behavior and outcomes for those companies. I'll stop there. I'm sure Trent and others have other ideas, but it's like we've seen this happen very successfully at organizations that take responsibility of this. So it's not an extraordinary idea, but something that needs to be modeled and done more often.
Yeah, Trent, I would love to hear your perspective on this. And additional, how to devalue experience versus skills, especially when women do take the maternity leave, et cetera, and lose out in the career, but it doesn't mean that they're not qualified.
Right. And I really appreciate, I just want to build actually on what Shanna said, that and to take a step back, it really comes down to an earlier implementation of culture within these companies. Culture it's not easily quantifiable. It's not something that I find easily measurable. But as I've worked with younger companies, older companies, the companies that took a very conscious, very direct approach at clearly defining and implementing a culture that would allow women and not just women, but women and minorities and veterans and LGBTQ and everybody to thrive and grow within that community, those companies thrive. Because we are in a workforce that's younger. We are in a workforce that demands different things than it did even before, even just before the pandemic. But you even look 5 or 10 years ago, and what was most important was job security, right? Being able to stay in my company. And that meant certain things. And if you were going to, Tara, to your point, take maternity leave, that affected, well, what is my job security then, right? And it's not the most important thing now. The single most important thing, and that we have, well, let me say, the single most important thing to the demographic now entering the workforce is purpose. What is the purpose? What is the cause that I'm serving by working at this company? What do I give to the world by participating in the company that I'm working with now, right? And one of the ways you define that is through your culture. How do we purposefully elevate women? How do we look at issues like maternity leave or pay disparity? How do we fix those? How are we working on those? It isn't just, well, we're going to try and hire someone onto our board of directors. We're going to try and hire a woman executive. It's what are our policies? What are we doing to have the kind of culture that allows them to succeed? So to get back specifically to your question, mid-sized companies, older companies, younger companies, the older companies, the larger companies, the IBMs, it's harder to turn a big ship like that, right? I've been at a company, and I won't say which company. It was a larger bank, and they tried to implement some diversity, equality, and inclusion standards. And about a third of the people, and I was on the team that was helping to try and implement these. And so I sort of saw firsthand some of the results. A third of the people were interested. Okay, let me hear what you have to say. A third of the people were very excited. Yes, I've been waiting for something like this. Excellent. And a third of the people wanted nothing to do with it. They didn't want to be in the room. They didn't want to hear about it. They just wanted to go do their job. And that's what you'll find in sort of the older companies that have an older, employee demographic, right? That's where the mid-size and the younger companies that, at least from my vantage point at venturecapital.org, the ones we work with are typically a younger demographic, right? Or they're hiring a younger demographic. That comes with built-in hopes and desires that they want to see that they're going to make a positive impact in the world. And if you can start that culture right at the very beginning as a startup, right? This is how we're going to be, and it's how we're going to be for the rest of how long we exist, whether that's 50 years or 5 months. This is our culture. Then you're going to be able to build into that a workforce that's going to be more indicative of your general community. It's going to be more representative. Your executive team will be more representative of your general community. And you're going to have people that want to thrive there. And then when you get to issues like maternity leave, you can always bounce that against what is our culture? What is our standard? How are we going to help these people, right? And I think we have, in particular, and I can speak to Utah, being from Utah, we have a much younger workforce, and we have a workforce that I believe is perfectly positioned to abandon, to jettison some of the earlier stereotypes that have been spoken to before of, well, we only invest in these kind of companies, or we only hire these kind of people, or I don't want to hire a woman because she might take maternity leave. I don't think the younger the demographic in the workforce, I think the more likely you are to find a more inclusive culture. And that would allow the younger, the smaller, the mid-sized companies to be the industry leaders in those ways, to be the disruptors in those ways. And if that's truly as important as the younger generation wants it to be, those companies are going to disrupt the larger companies because they'll be more attractive to the younger workforce.
I like what you're saying, and I'm assuming also the labor market is very similar in the United States as well as in Georgia, which is it's a very tight labor market. It's hard to find, ambitious people that are innovative, that are qualified with the right sort of skill set. So Trent, to your point, the culture aspect can actually help hire better people as well. So I love your point. And it rolls into my next question that I'd like to ask Dr. Nino or Dr. Nana to jump in on, which is, we mentioned 1 in 4 software engineers are female. And they're the ones that are receiving the new computer science degrees because of programs like what you've mentioned. Compensation trends, however, point to a huge potential job growth for these females when they approach and apply to these computer science roles. What ways can we encourage more women, outside of pay, of course, to study software engineering and to improve the presence of women in science in general?
I'd give a floor to Nana because she has the exact profession. So I think that she can share a very good experience of hers regarding the question.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you. That's very interesting question, actually, because what we have seen, we have very good statistics in the US, right? It's difficult to analyze the situation in other countries, especially in Georgia, because we don't have exact statistics. But in US, we have seen that it was a similar situation in other STEM areas and also medicine in the beginning, like around like 60s, when all the universities opened to women, because before that some programs were restricted for women, women were not allowed to all the programs. And we have seen that in medicine and biosciences, almost even equality achieved very fast, like around 80s. But with introducing PCs, personal computers, with developing Silicon Valley and introducing personal computers, they were mainly advertised for boys. So that were the area where number of women achieved 35% in computer sciences and then started dropping to 17% in the beginning of 2000. So it means that in this area, we had lack of efforts. And probably I will repeat myself when I say that it starts in schools. It starts, of course, it will start with media, it starts with advertising, with role models, but it also starts in schools. And what I have seen, women, usually girls, young girls, they usually have some kind of fear towards because we are raised not to risk, right? We are afraid of make mistakes more than boys. That's the culture, even in the US, right? When we raise girls, we teach them to be more cautious, to be less risky. And we see this also in startup field when you need more to go and risk a lot, right? So when we design the programs, like for example, engineering programs or robotics programs specifically for girls, once they try coding, once they try to build this Arduino robot, which makes some kind of actions according to the order you wrote, then you're getting free of this fear. So you understand that you can create something, and then what I see, then they change this approach and they choose computer science or software engineering or other fields. We don't have the situation in biosciences, for example, life sciences mostly. In Georgia, if you look into the universities, even professors, we have more professors in biology than women than men. So we need a similar, and if you look into contemporary biochemistry, I have a friend who's professor of biochemistry, and she always says, oh, I should have learned coding. And I'm telling her, if you can learn biochemistry, you can learn anything in this world, because contemporary biochemistry is very difficult, right? So if we achieved parities there, it means that with proper actions, with proper attitude of the general education system in the countries, we can achieve the same parity in computer science and software engineering in any field of STEM, because we have the same situation in physics and mathematics. We are just not discuss it so much because that's not very active fields right now.
Can I add one small point on this? Sorry,
Yes.
my computer died, I know why, but the thing is, like, I one point which is also very important is engagement of men, because mainly like men are the leads of like most organizations, like tech companies, but also in academic sector, we have the men who are leading. So usually when we talk about female, like it's mainly like men gathering, female gathering, and then the men are out of the kind of awareness, right awareness. I personally found it when working with some of the men in the leading position that at least they were not aware about some of the benefits or about the ethics and some main points. So I think that in this case, one also important thing is to engage men in similar type of discussions and also engage them in decision making, which is kind of gender mainstreamed.
No, I think that's a very important observation. And to move forward, there are certain industries or sectors that are certainly ahead of the game as to, you know, which basically is being mentioned by Dr. Nana as well. What sort of industries are in fact more indicative for the presence, the leadership, the pay parities, the equity parities, you know, that we're seeing when it comes to innovation as well as investment? If Chandana, Leslie, or Nana, or anyone would like to answer, I'd love to hear your viewpoints.
I'll just chime in on the healthcare side since Nana brought that up. Healthcare is a unique field, or like the biological sciences, biochem, all those fields are really unique in that degree holders graduating from those programs, it's about 50-50 women and men across the board, regardless of country almost. It's pretty impressive. Now, even entering the workforce, you see 50-50 women and men. At that first career step from entry level to management, it drops off dramatically. So what's happening there? It's not that, oh, the women are having experiences, the men are not happening. It's really about the optionality and the support companies give their women to grow, see a path to leadership, and support them through parenthood. That's really that's what's going on there. For me personally, and for many of my peers who have made it to executive level, it's been because of male mentors. So Miriam, your point is extremely valid. I had executive VPs, CEOs, even now Recursion CEO is my mentor, right? So that's male mentors that are lifting women up and helping them grow. So men don't get to sit on the sidelines on this one. Extremely important. Leslie, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, yeah, we're obviously trying to change the paradigm and not segment what industries women should go into versus men. I think the fastest growing technology companies are, you know, SaaS and fintech and things that do not require product scale. And yet CPG seems to be an easier or maybe more familiar for women and for female founders. So we're seeing a lot of female founders in CPG, and we don't do CPG, but we're seeing thousands and thousands do fintech and SaaS and B2B SaaS and deep tech and healthcare tech, et cetera, et cetera. I guess if you were to segment it, you would probably see, you know, a larger percentage of women going into CPG and into products and things like that, which is, in my mind, I don't love that. Because that's not where I see women really gaining an edge and being strong. I mean, they can obviously be strong role models. I mean, look at the Spanx and Rent the Runway and Stitch Fix, et cetera, et cetera. All of those companies that are now in the brand awareness is huge. But I would much rather see a woman start a company like Apple or Google or Facebook or, Snap or something that is changing the way that we interact, that we think about things. So anyway, I'm just giving my view. This is totally my perspective.
No,
and
I
how
completely see
how I
that
think.
too. Yeah, on the healthcare side too. So we have the whole spectrum, right? So AI and machine learning applied in healthcare, digital health apps and wellness, and everything from sunscreen to metabolism. And you see more women in those pockets of biotech, despite them being extremely scientific. Like that's the pockets and they live in, and it really has nothing to do with gender. I think it really has to do with our previous problem of exposure, right? And role models and seeing people like you working in those spaces, right? So, yeah, I don't like it. I don't love it either.
Well, and I think what you're bringing up is really important and kind of leading to the next point, which drills into viewing other successful people. Research also backs that experiential positions like mentoring, like advising, or doing internships and understudies just throughout people's careers, where it's still a give and take, are very important to help women embrace and succeed. What are some examples of placement opportunities that are available today for women who are getting into, these historically predominantly male sectors? If you guys have examples, that would be great. Trent?
Yeah. So the first thing I always say as it comes to mentoring is, when you're working at a job, there's your performance on the job. And then as you work to, rise up in the company, that's almost sort of a separate entity. It's almost a separate, I hesitate to use the word game, but it's a separate process, right? And just because you're excellent at your job, and I think this applies to everyone, doesn't necessarily mean you'll move up in the company. And one thing I always tell people is the power of informal mentors. There are programs that, and we can talk about that in a second, that people can apply to and go to and look for mentors. But just if nothing else, what it tells, an employer or someone up in a company that you have the courage to come and ask them to be a mentor, or if they don't have the time really necessarily to mentor you on an ongoing basis, on a consistent, regular basis, that you would come and ask for their advice. As I've mentored women, the number one thing I've said is go and ask the men in your company to be mentors for you. And it's a clear differentiator within a company of someone who's willing to go and ask for mentorship and someone who's happy and content to simply do their job. And so I want to start the conversation with just a nod to the ability to be proactive and to go and find those mentors, but then also to curate those mentors very carefully. And to not just ask for a mentor because they're above you in a company, but to understand that person and to be willing to end a mentorship relationship if it isn't working, or amend it or something of that nature, because they're meant to serve you and your career growth and your career path. I want to mention a statistic. Years ago, we had a woman who was a high-level executive at Oracle come and speak at one of our conferences, and she mentioned that in the years that she'd spent interviewing applicants for all the different positions at the company, that in all those times, thousands of applicants, there was only 2 men that never negotiated within their interview. They didn't negotiate salary or anything. And within that time, there was only 4 women who did. And she sort of said, listen, women need to get more used to negotiating, advocating, self-advocating, and going out and finding those that are going to advocate on their behalf. That's part of self-advocation, is finding those who will be your champion. And so I want to put a plug in for that, to be thoughtful and proactive and conscious about who you're reaching out to and who you want to have help you, whether it's in your company or in your industry, but not necessarily in your company. A role model, someone you've just met, and really make that a conscious process. Now, to your specific question, I'd say all the above. I'd never had an internship that I thought, well, that was a waste of time. Or, working with a mentor, you always learn something from people. And sometimes it's what to do, and sometimes it's what not to do. But to take advantage of all of those and how to, sometimes my best mentors taught me how to go find other mentors. Now, at venturecapital.org, we're an organization of 500 professional volunteer mentors. And we have the ability to say to someone, if you want to mentor someone within your industry or any industry, come and be a part of what we do. And we teach people how to mentor, and we teach, the mentors how to mentor other companies. But there's a lot of organizations like that exist. BoomStartup was one of them that had mentors. There's a lot of organizations in which if you're uncomfortable in an informal setting of going and finding a mentor, you can plug in and find mentors in these organizations within a university setting, an academic setting, within your company. A lot of companies will have those kind of formal processes set up. I come from the law firm world, and I was given 2 partners to be my mentor, and I went and found 2 others that I wanted to be my mentor. And it was I learned amazing things from all of them, but the ones that I went and proactively sought were much more engaged in helping me and teaching me the ropes and whatnot. But I would say on both sides that all of us should be looking for opportunities to mentor, regardless of the station that we feel like we're at, whether we are at, just entry-level position or whatnot, or at the top of a company. Finding opportunities to mentor others then allows to give back to the next generation, so to speak, that's coming up. And sometimes we talk a lot about going and finding a mentor, but go and find someone to mentor. I recently helped an employee here at Entrada, a young woman, and walked her around the WTC. We had a Women's Tech Council Awards seminar, and just introduced her to people. And she found that at the table where she was sitting, she didn't know this, but at the same table where she was sitting was the CTO of her company and the CEO of her company and the chief marketing officer of her company. And we went and met them and introduced her. And now one of them is going to be her mentor. But it takes that kind of proactivity to go out and meet people and take control of your career. But know that you're doing it so that as you rise, you'll be able to mentor people coming behind you.
Thank you, Trent. Leslie, do you have anything else to add?
On the mentorship aspect, or yeah, I mean, I see we address mentorship from so many different angles, and right now it's really about trying to get more women to understand that investing is not a boy's word, or finance is not for just for men. That it's exciting, that it's interesting, that it's creative, and that it's doable. That there's no roadblocks, or the perceived roadblocks are there by women, and I think we create them for ourselves because we were talking about how women are less are not risk takers. Well, we grow up to think about family and community, and we're the ones who have to have the babies. We can't have them in ovens. And so there is a lot of nature and nurture. But I think nature is a big part. It's hard to overcome nature. And so our natural instincts are to be protective, and that by definition means that we are we have less proclivity for risk, although I have a huge proclivity for risk. But so we have to be taught how to look outside of that comfort zone, and that's we're trying to educate people every day, women every day. We've got interns all over. We're constantly reaching out to women. Have you thought about the idea of not just investing, but of changing the world a different way, getting involved in creating something, or helping somebody else to create something? Yes, it requires money. It does, but you don't have to be a numbers genius to get involved. I mean, I was not a finance major. I did not go to business school. So anyway, that's where I'm coming from.
And I think it's very important because investment needs as many mentors as it does for creating innovation, because both are insanely bold. and quickly evolving. So Leslie, I really appreciate your perspective on that. We're coming closely into of our time, so we're going to just go a few minutes over, but we're going to end with a very important comment or question, and it really lends to the funding or the access to capital. Very common problem of growing businesses stems from access to capital. We acknowledge that there's a ton of work to be done to improve this very bleak situation. Only 4.9% of venture capital deals go toward women-led businesses, and only 2% of the dollars. 66% of the entrepreneurs find it challenging, of women entrepreneurs, excuse me, find it challenging to obtain business funding in general. What efforts are being made to change these statistics? And, you know, what kind of advice do you have for other women who are in the position of investing into other businesses? And Dr. Nino, if we can start with you first.
Well, it's really a very complicated topic, because we can talk about this for hours and for months, I'd say. But first of all, I would commend that investing in diverse entrepreneurs is much needed for the economies in every country in order to boost, for example, post-pandemic recovery, for example, right? So as today, it's one of the biggest challenges we are facing. Women across the world not only earn less than men, but are also less likely to get access to capital for their businesses in Georgia and I'd say in every country which we have deeply researched. So there is a data, for example, for Crunchbase, that businesses with only female founders have the percentage of businesses having only female founders, and I mean VC funds is around 2% only. So it's a disaster, I would say, and lack of access to finances, to financial resources is one of the main challenges that women entrepreneurs are facing. And also in terms of savings and access to additional capital, there are less resources available for women, which is why it's harder for them to get even bank loans or certain capital into enterprises. So we know, for example, very interesting research that if women participated equally to men in the entrepreneurship, the global GDP could increase approximately by 6%, which is around $5 trillion to the global economy. And again, I'll say that, for example, in order to boost post-pandemic recovery, investing in diverse entrepreneurs is an important thing to do. And launching new business requires, some skills and the development of a variety of these new skills and functions. I think that mentorship could help early stage ventures to access the new markets and navigate these financing options, implement, latest technologies and so on. And to better understand why investing in diverse entrepreneurs is crucial, we should focus also on benefits that extend beyond financial returns, and no one is actually talking about this, even though we know that the decades of data has shown that female founders make more money and bring higher returns of investment, and these are the facts. Still, I think that we have to discuss more why we should focus on non-financial benefits also. Funding female entrepreneurs is great for investors, I think, because women are creating venture, backable, scalable, high-tech companies, and I believe that investors who acknowledge the true potential of women-owned businesses and invest in them won't regret it at all. It's imperative to closing the gender gap, first of all, and upgrading the venture capital ecosystem to one that serves all founders regarding their gender. I was actually reading some number of research regarding the topic, but I couldn't find any interesting data like latest materials which will support the investment making process. of the people who are interested to invest, but who finalize going to this 98% statistics while investing in men-led companies. So yeah, I think that as a representative of university, we could also initiate this kind of research to further, support the access to capital of women. And Mariam is also one of the professors at our university, and she's researching the access to finances in the country in gender, gender-wise also. So she can make some interesting comments about this also. Thank you.
Please jump in, Mariam.
So quick comment on like a general recommendation, and also as for the access to finance as well. So as a general recommendation for women, I have to say that on the one hand, from the women perspective, the courage is the important word which the women have to have in their mindset always, to not to be afraid and to take step. And the second word is sharing. So what you have gone through and experienced, you have to then share your experience and encourage others. Like mentorship, the panelists were talking about, it's very important to also mentor and encourage others, those who are still afraid of making the steps. Luckily, I did not have the experience of harassment, but on the other side, what I've experienced was that men's voice was heard louder than women. So even with my experience, we were two deputies in the same organization. One was like Lady Me and another one was male. So if I wanted something to be kind of fulfilled or implemented soon, I was asking the second deputy to bring this to the chairman, because when we were sitting together, even though I was talking the same, the other deputy's voice was heard better. So this is what women experience very often also. And I think that in this regard, do not make the same mistakes I did. You have to kind of bring the voice, and you have to put your agenda on the table, even though sometimes it might not be supported in the same promptly. As for the access to finance, Trent was saying very correctly that it's not about something CSR or responsibility of supporting women, but I want to compare this to also quotas and initiatives, which is very important. You cannot be on an equal position if you do not get the opportunity first. So in order to get this opportunity, you have to have some incentives. And I'm oftenly comparing the quotas, those who do not believe to quotas, and me myself was also very skeptical about quotas in the beginning, but I'm comparing it to seatbelt penalties. Like generally we understand that seatbelt is very important for our own safety, but until we did not have the penalties, high penalties on wearing the seatbelt, we did not use it. Now it's in our mindset, and we do not even remember that there is any penalty or not. So it's a kind of a temporary instrument and tools. Same with the scoring, which is supporting and bringing the impact for a certain time, and then it might be disappearing when it's becoming normal. So unless it's not normal, you have to put this effort. And from the reforming perspective and from the legal perspective, I assume that scoring quotas is a very useful instrument.
And I'm sorry, I'll jump in again, as I guess we are finalizing the discussion very soon. I think that for me personally, it would be interesting to listen to some kind of recommendations, what and who can do anything to improve, the situation we have. And we have thought about it a lot. And first of all, let's start that educating the next generation of women entrepreneurs in STEM subjects as early as possible, which was already said, is a very important thing to do. Then doing the research to measure the effectiveness of companies founded by women, and to raise awareness about the success of these kinds of entities is very important. Again, we are going to disseminating the information about the role models, about the success stories, which is really created by women, but which is of which we are not so much aware. Then I think that we should work with VC funds and other financial institutions probably to expand the dedicated funding programs, I would say, for women entrepreneurs, and also use media like digital media and do campaigning, do more storytelling, inspiring young generations. It really makes sense. This is how we increase the number of our 8 beneficiaries from coding school for women up to 3,000 or 4,000 already. And also, let's not forget about involvement and different initiatives of government. European governments have multiple policy options also, and we could discuss to start investing in childcare facilities that would be easily accessible for women entrepreneurs, and maybe provide, some tax relief to organizations investing in childcare facilities, or generate other ideas to address these challenges, because in Georgia, it's not really much addressed so well. So I think that this is, even though we are mostly focusing today on education or business or VC funds, decisions, let's not forget about governmental initiatives, which connects the whole ecosystem together. So there are quite a lot of things which could be done by this joint, collaboration, I think.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully stated. Chandana, if you have any additional.
I was just going to point to some of the specific things that are happening to get funding to women. And I'm sure Trent also can talk about that. But it's, for us at Altitude, we specifically look and recruit women entrepreneurs because we know the biggest gap is actually the social circles and networks investors run in and women entrepreneurs run in don't tend to overlap. So what we do is bring access to those investors really early in the entrepreneur's journey. So trust is built between entrepreneur and investor ahead of fundraising. So that's one thing anybody could do across the globe, is create more access points for women entrepreneurs to meet and develop relationships with investors. Other things that are happening, limited partners, who are the investors that put money in venture capital's pocket to then disseminate to entrepreneurs, are increasingly asking their investors or their venture capitalists to invest in minorities and women, right? So that's making it a criteria for the money and where it's going. And so I would really advocate for foundations out there. So all the philanthropic agencies that are putting sums of money into venture capital, to make that criteria, right? So that there's awareness of how venture capital are looking for deals. And so that's how we can start to align incentives across the board for everyone from LP and government to venture capital to our entrepreneurs, and how they meet and connect with investors. Because at the end of the line, we're people, and we invest in people we trust, ideas we trust, and we're all influenced by our bias. So we've got to, start aligning access points and incentives so those biases start, falling to the wayside. Trent, I'm sure you have also similar ideas. I'm sad Leslie had to drop off because she's effectively doing this, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I just, again, I find myself building on things that everyone else says. I really appreciate your remarks. One of the things that defines an ecosystem and its ability to help entrepreneurs raise capital is how consolidated the investment network is, right? If you're an entrepreneur and you can't, and there are angel investors or venture capitalists in your ecosystem, but you can't find them, then you can't access them. And one of the things that's great about, and I'll use Salt Lake as an example, is it's a very consolidated investment market. You've got groups that are called, such as the Park City Angels or the Salt Lake City Angels. You have VC firms, you have, other groups where if you're an entrepreneur, a quick Google search will reveal, a good number of sources where you can go and find some of this, find some of this funding and do some pitching. Other markets are just beginning that, or maybe they're just a little bit behind where Salt Lake is, or they're far ahead of where Salt Lake is, right? But the ability of the entrepreneur, outside of maybe necessarily like what Chidana said about the network, if you have your own personal network, that's one thing, but then being able to go out and find those investors is different. So one of the things that we're doing is we're trying to help consolidate another piece of the network and consolidate women angel investors that would have a specific interest in going and finding some of these women-led, women-owned companies and investing directly in them, similar to what Leslie's doing, right? She's a little bit later stage. We're trying to do something where sort of fill a void in the market, in the ecosystem, where we want to find angel investors, women angel investors, accredited investors who maybe don't know how to invest. They've never invested before, or women who are accredited investors, but just don't know they're accredited investors, and reach out to them. Is this something you'd like to participate in? Is this something you'd like to be involved in? And start the flywheel turning of getting those women involved in investment. We think that increasing the consolidation and the volume on the funding side of the table of women who are ready to be investors is going to help then on the other side, on the flip side, the deal flow, help those women those women entrepreneurs find the funding. So, that's part of how we're doing it, is attempting to reach out and consolidate the market, find those women investors, teach them how to be angel investors, match them with mentors who have been doing angel investing for a long time, and then have that be a resource as well. Not that there aren't already resources, but one specifically designed towards finding, engaging, empowering, and investing in women entrepreneurs. So just another approach, a different angle to do exactly the same thing that's been said, but, finding a niche where we can be of use in the market as well.
Yeah, I love that. You're flipping the bias on its head, right? So like, by empowering more female investors, we're basically broadening the network that those investors have to entrepreneurs. So
exactly.
That's, at least in this field, in early stage investing, entrepreneurs are up against a lot of bias, female entrepreneurs particularly. And the best way to beat bias is to build relationships and know each other as human beings. So if you're an entrepreneur out there, you have to start meeting investors now before you want money. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Nana, do you have anything else to add?
I think investment aspects and issues were covered very well by other speakers. Thank you very much for this. It was a very interesting discussion. And I totally agree with Nino. I think designing the programs at the university level will help a lot. And also there is a big problem in Georgia as in European countries with need, with youth not in education and not in training and not in having jobs. So probably this is also a segment we can think about how to attract more to entrepreneurship.
No, indeed. I really appreciate it. Well, I'd like to thank the panelists so much for their time and insight. Levon?
Yes, thank you very much. This was a wonderful, wonderful webinar, wonderful panel. Thank you for sharing your experience, your expertise with us. And I think it's going to be very valuable for anybody that's going to that listened in and participated, and further when we distribute this information to universities as well, and different groups through social media, through different platforms. I think it's going to be very valuable. And on another aspect, I wanted to mention another valuable point to this webinar is actually connecting the speakers here and their entities, their agencies, their companies with each other, because I think that is the beginning of a great collaboration that can turn into a long-lasting partnership. And I think amongst all of you here, there's a lot of resources available for for students, for startups, for any companies, women-led companies in Georgia, in the United States. And I think this collaboration here will help advance that and develop that even further. So again, thank you all for taking the time. I know it's getting late in Georgia as well. And thank you for staying with us. I really appreciate that. And looking forward to working with all of you as a Consulate General here and on the personal level as well. So again, thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Bye.
much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.